Psilocybin anyway, Tristan, not on plastic eating mushrooms. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of On Psilocybin. We are live and shrooming. Not really, or at least I'm not. I didn't eat any mushrooms today. Did you eat mushrooms today, Tristan?
No. Pick
Let's see.
some. Didn't.
Some oyster, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, or allegedly psilocybin. Some
Eh,
unknown little brown mushrooms.
Yeah. LBMs.
Still waiting on that spore print to make sure to see what it is.
Yeah. Still waiting on that microscope.
Yeah. You got to save those spores and those mushrooms so when your microscope comes, you can know what they are.
Very true.
I think that's something that we should talk about. I had a nice derby day picking some Psilocybe ovoidiosis studiata for our church, wearing my sanctuary rep there. Just came out from mowing the yard. That's why I was looking so fresh and green. Got a big old pimple starting on the side of my nose. What's up, everybody? This is the real deal raw on psilocybin. I was really thinking the other day, though, Tristan, that no matter what, if nobody listens to this, which there's already two people, so somebody is, which one of them's probably Courtney, but it's what I wanted to do. I have so long been wanting to do something like this to just, I don't know, just talk about psilocybin in an informal, very real, raw way, because I know for a fact that is where the real growth happens. We can have all these courses and classes, and we're doing this minister training for sanctuary, and all of that is wonderful, but it's in the dirt where we really learn how to work with this sacrament, this process. It's not in the dry, clinical, cold, sterile environment. People, I've seen so many times people that like want to start out in a like quiet, pristine, air conditioned bedroom, and they get halfway through and they're like, "What the fuck am I doing behind these walls? Get me outside!" You know, and it's all beautiful, it's all good wherever it happens, but psilocybin is something that is a very real, very raw experience. It's not something that I don't think is best served in this cold, quiet, pristine environment. I mean, they grow on shit anyway, right? Lots of times. But yeah, so the ovoid season is getting going here in Kentucky. It's running a little slow. These mushrooms really like it wet. I forget about that almost every year. Oyster and shiitake and lion's mane, and a lot of these other mushrooms do really well with high ambient humidity. And the ovoids need more than that. They need like really saturated ground. At least that's what I've found. And those that I have found this year, I have found in kind of ravine-ish type areas where there's been a lot of soaking runoff. So if you're out there looking for ovoids, please be careful. I am not endorsing illegal activity, but I know that some of you motherfuckers are out there doing it. I know you are, because I'm one of them too. I'm picking them for the church. These are all for sanctuary, used in a sacramental sense. But I also understand that many people are picking mushrooms for a sacred personal experience. No matter how you frame it, the mystical aspect of the psilocybin experience is where the healing comes from. And so, in my perspective, psilocybin mushrooms are always a sacrament. If you're using them in a concert, if you're using them in a retreat, if you're using them in a religious service, if you're using them in your bedroom, wherever, however, it's always a mystical, mysterious experience. What's that mean? It means that it's ineffable. It means that there's some aspect of the experience that cannot be put into words, which is beautiful because then we get to define our own spirituality. So long, this is why people hate the word church, and I get it. This is why people are distance themselves from religion and terms like God, because spirituality has been co-opted. And this is our opportunity to reclaim our own connection with the ineffable, with that thing that cannot be named. I love it. And that's why I mushrooms. So yeah, I picked, I don't know, it's probably ended up being about 6 dry ounces right now of ovoids. Um, hasn't been that great of a year here in Kentucky. I know there's a couple of folks out there that I won't name out of respect for your privacy who have messaged me privately and said that they've been picking, but their spots aren't really popping off like they did last year or the year before. And I think that has to do with the kind of not necessarily dry spring, but we've had, but not the soaking wet spring. The ovoids or the mushrooms that you allegedly found, Tristan, were they in a rather damp area or were they in a rather dry area? Do you recall specifically?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't really say like leaf litter, but allegedly they were growing, in the thicket of
Mm.
sorts, kind of just sorting through, definitely out of the sun's rays in many ways.
Are you still seeing me?
Yeah,
Okay, I'm
yeah.
gonna try. Let's see. I shared I shared a picture of some of these
Everything's better wet.
ovoids. Who said that?
Kevin.
Was that my wife? Oh, Kevin. Okay.
Well,
Of course it was Kevin. Man, I was
it
looking
made
for.
me think like on the episode that released today, Psilocybin Says.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of the things that Melissa really spoke about was just being connected with nature, even though she was kind of in the confines of a building, just wanting to be uh, kind of toes in the grass, disconnected from any barriers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, I was thinking about that today. I was outside barefoot, and um, man, there's really actually so much here that we could really branch off into. But just today, being barefoot outside while I was mowing and remembering people that have said to me things about getting barefoot after a mushroom trip and having not been barefoot for years, and just how many people are so disconnected from nature, from the earth. How many people live inside of a house and go to a car and go to an office and go to a restaurant and go to a home and wake up and do the same thing and don't take their shoes off, don't walk in the woods, are scared. That fucking turtle. Me and Tristan found a big ass snapping turtle today. You know how many people would have lost their shit if they would have come across that turtle? You know. So I don't know, man. I continually am grateful for my heritage as a Kentucky boy. Um, but anyway, I'm trying to get to this. I want to get to this picture here. I want to get to this. Actually, it's a video, and it's going to be a little bit janky how I do this. But if y'all just bear with me, I want to try to show um, something that I think is really valuable for harm reduction purposes only in terms of these ovoids. All right, let's see. Let's see. All right, tell me, Tristan, is this visible to you?
Um, you gotta go maybe a
This
little
is
bit
horrible.
up.
I'm such a fucking
Uh,
unprepared, on the fly troglodyte. I know. Let's see. All right, this.
maybe I can. Maybe I can drop a link.
Drop a link. Why don't you please do that? I don't know how. I wonder. I'm trying to think of a way that I could get this to this slide. It's Courtney's laptop, um, and because there's a really great screen share here on Restream that I just found out about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I am going to Facebook message this to you. Uh, Message. I just said message. I'm going to Facebook message that to you. And I'm going to see if you can get the whatchamadoodle on the whatchamagig.
Sweet.
And then there it comes. It's kind of in the last 30 seconds or so of this 55-second video. I could hold on. I'm gonna also gonna You go ahead and do that if you want, but I'm also going to try to share it with Courtney. See if you can get it to go. It should have been through there by now.
Yeah, I just got it. Another thing you were talking about, kind of the ways at which someone's spirituality can be demonstrated.
Mm-hmm.
If Sanctuary has a revival, that's gonna be lit as hell.
A tent revival,
Oh yeah,
old school tent revival. Hey, I don't think we'd get any weirder, honestly. Have you ever been around? You've been around some of those tent revivals, yeah? Oh, yeah,
oh,
you've been around them.
the food's kick ass,
Oh, yeah?
but I
I
mean,
haven't gotten
vibes
close
a little
enough.
weird.
Yeah, no, they used to do those in Jamaica. Athena, you have to get Athena. Did she ever tell you the story about the first retreat that she worked down there, and during the mushroom trip, a tent revival started kicking off, and the guy was like, "And you're gonna burn in hell." It was crazy loud, and man, it was something else. Let's see. All right, so I got this video. Okay, boom. Let me just see if I can figure this out. I don't know if it's gonna work. Um, Screen share, window. This one, is that working? Yep. Okay, hold on. All right, so you're seeing this picture of my beautiful bald head right there? Are you seeing that? Okay. Oh, let me turn the volume up. Boom. All right. Are you hearing and seeing this okay over there?
Can't see anything yet.
Oh, even when I play, you can't now? You don't see the video?
No, let me.
Man, I really want to be able to show this to people. Oh, wait. There we go. Here we go. Whoa, that is some meta shit there. Okay. Are you seeing the video of my beautiful cheeks right there?
Yes.
And that's all you're seeing?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So look, here we go. Here we go, folks. All right. So this is again for harm reduction purposes only. I want people to see how ovoids grow so that they are not confused with any poisonous species. I am not encouraging you to do anything illegal. If you're doing something illegal, you're doing it at your own damn risk. I am not responsible. But as someone who harvests mushrooms legally for our church, I'm going to just try to help keep people safe here. All right. So this is what a nice, beautiful ovoid vine looks like. All right. Okay. See this here? Okay. So you see these caramel color wavy caps there. They're a little bit hard to distinguish from the mulch. All right. This is where it gets really interesting. And the pictures that someone I know who was picking ovoids today that was not Tristan sent me were a very similar situation. This little lawn lettuce stuff, I think is what it's called, is very frequently where these mushrooms are found. But watch this video and see how abundant they are. Okay, there's a few right there. There's a few right there on the margin of this. But what you got to do is not stop there. Booyah! So I was recording that video trying to create a harm reduction video because you very often see poisonous, not necessarily deadly, but semi-toxic mushrooms growing alongside ovoids. And I have people all the time sending me pictures saying, "Is this an ovoid? Is this an ovoid?" And it's not. So it's really important that people understand as this becomes more common knowledge, and there are more people that are picking psilocybin mushrooms in the Midwest. You've got to know what you're dealing with, and that what you saw there is it's not the best quality video, obviously, but that there's like a vein. You can see this kind of vein of how they grow, and it was a nice kind of drainage runoff spot. But up inside of that um, lawn lettuce or whatever it's called, very often, if you find a few on the outskirts of that, you'll find a fuck ton underneath. And that day ended up being a beautiful, beautiful day. Everybody else was out derby partying, and I was doing my thing. So,
Well, see, that's one of the things. That, allegedly they have a smell to them, like just
I
this very unique.
I could smell them in the air. I even there was a video that I took before that. I won't subject you all to my video skills again. But in the video right before that, I actually said in the video, you can smell them in the air. It's a beautiful smell. It's kind of like, um, I don't know. You just have to know it. Do you know the
Yeah,
smell?
getting familiar. Got to smell more mushrooms. I think that's one of the biggest things. You know, even in between flushes, like fungus is still going to produce mushrooms, and I think that's a hey Theo. I think that's a very
Okay.
valid point too. Of whenever you are talking about like people sending you pictures, and they're like, maybe somebody told me that there's ovoids in this place, and then there's just a little brown mushroom.
No, the
It's not
smell
an ovoid.
the smell is definitely an identifying feature if you don't know. I think the easiest aspect is the bluing, really, because they're so full of psilocin that they're often bluing on the margin of the cap before you even touch them. You know, and then when you pick them, the stems bruise easily. The gills, more than anything, bruise very readily. Uh, and I guess what does it matter? Yes, there's mushrooms and there's free mushrooms, or people want to look at it like that, or it's fun to go forage mushrooms. But what I find to be the most valuable aspect is the way that the ovoids treat me when I consume them. They are, I feel like, a kinder, gentler mushroom. They are more potent, but they are um, they just don't seem to have that kind of that cubensis can have. Sometimes cubes, especially if you're taking a really high dose, like 7 or more grams, cubes can come down, whew, really, really, um, almost aggressively. I feel like, and I'm not the only person that said this. I've heard people say this, and it's only when you have comparison. I've had Mexicana, I've had ovoids, I've had different paniolas. I have not had the good fortune of having senescens or azarescens yet. I've had Galendoy, and there is a difference. And ovoids are by far my favorite. Part of that I question is to just gonna go ahead and get wonky here is the energy. You know, the Mazatec and the traditional societies that picked mushrooms, wild mushrooms, psilocybin mushrooms, they only allowed virgin children to harvest the mushrooms because they believed that whoever picked the mushrooms imputed their energy into the mushrooms. And after all these years of growing and picking and observing the experiences and having so many experiences, I believe it to be 100% true. There are certain people who I would just never take mushrooms from. I would just not. And then there are people who I know who grow mushrooms that I want their mushrooms if I have to get mushrooms from somebody else. And so you have to wonder with cubensis and the history behind it, the kind of methods of cultivation, that underground kind of icky black market vibe is really unpleasant in and of itself. And ovoids are a species that was only identified in 2007, I think. And it wasn't even until like 2020. What is that right? No, it was 2016 when I first found myself first found ovoids. And to my knowledge, at that time, there were only a handful of people because I would go on the forums and search all the shroomeries and Reddits and all that stuff, trying to find people who were picking these species. And you would
Mm-hmm.
find a handful of people that were picking them out of creek beds and stuff, but nobody was talking about finding them in, parks and public space like they now occur, or maybe they were all that time anyway, and just nobody was doing it. But people weren't picking them like that. At least they weren't advertising it. And now, if you go on forums and you hear people talking, they're like, "Oh yeah, I pick these in the parks and whatnot all the time." Um, but I guess what's behind that is it truly feels to me like they are kind of a clean species in terms of societal baggage, and
Oh,
that has a huge value for me.
well, I mean, it makes me think. I love seeing like crazy genetics. Like I truly do. Like it's amazing to see the peanut history of the penis envy mushroom. Like that was a great episode. But there is an interesting part of seeing these mushrooms that have not to say that they cannot be grown outdoors, because there's definitely cultivation techniques for that, but they just haven't seen the sunlight in how long. That haven't, like, I mean, just generations and generations and generations of never being what they were truly designed to be in
Yeah,
many
what
ways.
they were on their own in the wild. I really think that's an interesting point. And while I have a certain amount of appreciation for all the kind of varieties that have come out,
Mm-hmm.
and like it's funky, it's cool as shit to see like um, the all the penis envy albino teachers and the things like Enigma and all the kind of weird stuff. It's very cool. It's very cool, but there is something for me. There's something about like the natural mushroom that has enormous value.
Wisdom is, I mean, it's as simple as the issue is peyote. Like there's been plenty of uh, wannabe saviors of the peyote that have just wanted to come through and just be like, well, we'll build you a bunch of greenhouses and we'll just
Mm-hmm.
stockpile them, every square inch of it, to the max.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a lot of pushback from cultures who actually use it, and they're like, we don't want it that way.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they
Makes
would much
sense.
rather still harvest it uh, from their lands. I mean,
Well, that's written into our bylaws at Sanctuary, or our operating guidelines rather, is that
that's for sure.
wild harvested psilocybin is held in the highest regard by our organization because it is a natural gift of nature, of whatever. And there is a there's a serendipity in finding these mushrooms. There's the effort that goes into it. There's the meditation that you get while you're walking and looking for them, and that joy that you get when you find them. And if we're going to talk about energy being imparted into the mushrooms, is that not a part of it? You know, I mean, and I swear to God, there's times people kind of laugh at me when I say this, or just think I'm just making something up. But there have been multiple times where I have been in my house and the mushrooms are like, "We're over here, come get us." I'm like, "Oh God!" And they won't stop until I go out there and find them. And then when I get there they are.
Intermission.
Yeah, sorry. Oh man, we have really,
We should not in the
really been
basement.
struggling with the child care. No, I'm not in the basement. But it has been a lot of stress. Parents out there, I really feel for you. It is really, COVID made it challenging at first, and then now, ever since then, there's like hard to find childcare, and income isn't what it used to be. And man, we have been struggling. But anyway, I love my children so much, and I love being able to see them so much. But I would probably appreciate them a little bit more if I
Do you have
didn't
anything
have somebody
to
to call
answer
all the time.
Kevin's question about ancient Egypt?
Oh, sorry, I didn't have the chat up there.
No, you're fine.
Ancient Egypt. Oh, is there any evidence of souls? Oh, yeah, for sure. I'm actually working on a PowerPoint that I'm going to put on the web for free for anybody and everybody to see, that catalogs sacred mushrooms throughout human history. And there are some hieroglyphs that are unmistakably pharaohs holding mushrooms. The ancient Egyptians were the first, at least that I know of. They probably weren't the first. It probably goes back to Sumerians. But the ancient Egyptians, I know, classified edible mushrooms, not necessarily psychoactive mushrooms, as the food of the gods. The pharaohs were considered gods, right? And the mushrooms were reserved just for the pharaohs. They are, like wild mushrooms are not easy to find. There's not enough to feed the entire population, and they are an extreme delicacy. So, therefore, they get reserved for bigwigs. Um, Another really interesting kind of non psychedelic note here, and I may have gone over this before, but I think it's worth going over again. Um, the story of the Israelites, right? You got Moses, he's a Pharaoh high priest, and then he is like, fuck all you Pharaohs, and I'm a Hebrew, and me and my people are getting out of here, and blah, blah, blah. And so the story says that they go out into the desert. Now, please understand, I'm not a biblical literalist, but there,
Had me mistaken.
yeah, there certainly are some stories in there that have a factual basis, you know. Um, and I'm not going to get into all the evidence of the story of Moses being, to a certain degree, historically accurate, uh, not the sea parting like that, although that's an interesting story as well. The actual truth of the Red Sea parting, because there is a very real phenomena that occurs that seems to be tied to that story. But anyway, in the story of Moses and the Israelites out in the desert, and they're out there for however long, and they're hungry, they don't eat food, and they're like, "Oh, Moses, you suck. You brought us out here to die in the desert. What are we going to do?" And the story goes that Moses says, "Shut the fuck up. Tonight you'll eat quail, and tomorrow you'll eat bread." And in by the way, that's the Arabic version of the Bible where Moses says "shut the fuck up." I don't think he actually uses the F word in the King James version, but he says you're gonna, you'll have quail for dinner and bread for breakfast. And so, before the story goes that before they fall asleep, this kind of flock of quail comes down, and they cook and eat a bunch of quail. And the next day, they woke up, and the ground was covered with white loaves of bread that came with the dew and withered in the sun. And they were instructed by Moses to take no more than they could eat for the day, except for on the eve of the harvest or the eve of the Sabbath, they could collect enough for the Sabbath day. But in order to preserve it, they were to slice it and dry it or parboil it. Okay. And it says that there were some greedy Israelites that took more than their fair share, more than they could eat in a day. And when they did, that overnight it bred worms and stank. So, how this relates is me studying the Bible one in my 20s and harvesting wild mushrooms. And it's kind of all was very simultaneous, that I got into biblical history and got into mushrooms and started to wonder if there was evidence of mushrooms used in the Old Testament or anywhere in the Bible, and came across this story, and it was, I believe it was shortly after I came across this story that I collected some mushrooms, left them on my kitchen table, got stoned, fell asleep, woke up the next day, and those mushrooms had erupted in maggots. And I was like, holy shit, it bred worms and stank. It looked like rotting flesh. And the key is if you dry mushrooms or if you parboil them, then it will kill any eggs in there and you won't have that issue. They will preserve like they did for the Sabbath. What the story says that the Israelites called this bread manna, for they knew not what it was. And I had always thought, when I read that, I thought manna was like kangaroo, right? Supposedly, I've heard that this is not true, but I've heard it said that the word kangaroo means we don't know what the fuck it is. I don't
Shit.
know. You know, true or not, I don't know. But when I read this story, they called it manna because they didn't know what it was. I thought that this was a word that means I don't fucking know. Well, the truth is that manna is a Syrian term that means fungus or mushroom, and so the Israelites or these people, they borrowed a word from another language to describe a thing because they didn't have a word for it. The kicker in this whole story, I think, is that Moses was a Egyptian high priest, and who got the mushrooms? The Egyptian elite, right? So of course he would know if there was an Egyptian elitist reformist that was leading these refugees out into the desert, that person would be likely to know that this was actually a food. And so the other piece of evidence is that in the Arabian Peninsula, in the Middle East, there are still harvested desert truffles, which aren't truffles at all. They're actually puffballs. And puffballs, if you people who pick mushrooms know that every puffball is edible until it develops, the spores mature internally and it gets all brown and yellow and nasty. But as long as they're solid white throughout, then every species of puffball, to my knowledge, is entirely edible. And it looks like a loaf of bread on the ground. It withers in the sun. They come with the dew. Those mushrooms that I just showed you in that video were, a product of the dew collecting in those little micro pockets. And so, boom, there you go. It's not a psychedelic mushroom, but it's a mushroom. Did they use psychedelic mushrooms? I think it's likely. I think that Amanita is probably were used. What were you going to say?
Oh, nothing. I mean, like, I just imagine, like, say that you were like an Egyptian king, and then you come across, like, I mean, let's take Amanita, but even if you were to say like a psilocybin containing mushroom, it's like during your trip, whenever you've grown up your entire life and you've been told that like this world is your divine right, like you were born to conquer and own all of this. I think during the trip that they were just like afterwards, like, don't tell anyone, but I don't know if this is true.
Maybe, or maybe they were like, "Fuck yeah, I'm the god."
Oh, I mean,
Build me a pyramid, bitches. I needed the tomb of all tombs.
God.
Yeah, that whole thing. There probably was some tripping going on in those pyramids, if I had to guess.
Oh, there was something going on. I
mean,
mean,
look at it.
we're
If
still
the
confused.
Yeah, we still don't know, right? Now, if they were, in northern Africa, where we have tons of cave paintings that clearly depict psilocybin mushrooms and cattle together, and the Nile was this lush, rich environment where there were cattle, surely they were picking psilocybin there too, and surely those were being used by the elite, you know. So a lot of it is really shrouded in mystery, and that's I think sometimes I wonder about that, you know, um, the fact that it seems like aside from the Mesoamerican culture, and even they were a lot more discreet than we are. Everybody knows that people eat mushrooms, and it's like not a secret necessarily, but kind of the way that we are to a certain degree parading it or starting to parade it. I sometimes wonder if that is, the best way to handle this very powerful, very sacred um, organism. The Chinese, I've been in this PowerPoint I've been putting together. There's a lot of evidence of, well, I say a lot. There is evidence of shamanic, Taoist Chinese, ancient Chinese cultures using psychedelic plants, including mushrooms. Gymnopilus spectabilis, the big laughing gym, is known over there. It was called the laughing mushroom. There's some question as to whether or not the term maitake actually originated with a psychoactive mushroom, because maitake means the dancing mushroom, because you're supposed to be so happy that when you eat it, you dance. And the story goes back to these Japanese Buddhist nuns who ate maitake and became intoxicated and started dancing naked in the forest. I've eaten a lot of maitake, and it ain't ever got me naked. Now, I've seen psilocybin get a handful of people naked. So, and dancing. So there's some interesting kind of diverging descriptions there. But as I looked and looked and looked, there's so little like direct mention of psilocybin or psychoactive mushrooms, but within these cultures that didn't necessarily write down everything. The other psychoactive plants that were used weren't necessarily um, documented thoroughly either. Uh, say Midwest says cubensis originated in India, believe, not sure. Yeah, again, this is all like you know the oldest religion that we know of is um, um, oh shit. I just mentioned them a few minutes ago. I'm blanking. Not Hinduism, the precursor to Hinduism, not Zoroastrianism, but even before that, uh, the shit. I'm blanking. But anyway, there is plenty of evidence that in the oldest religion, organized religion, that psilocybin mushrooms were used there. And even before that, though, like in the cave paintings, before religion was ever a thing, right?
Mhm.
There were documentations of psilocybin mushrooms.
Well,
Uh,
I, I,
good.
I mean, it really makes me think that, where does the line, where does that transition line happen? At which point do we call these things sacred? Within a culture, where does the line between sacred and healing in plants? Uh, I guess is the way that I'm looking at it. Like because in many cultures, like these same things that have psychoactive and hallucinogenic effects, I mean, that is a healing modality. So I don't know if that makes sense, but
Well,
it's like, how would we depict that necessarily?
where I think this is a really interesting conversation, starts to get really interesting, is when we take it out of the plant sphere and we put it in kind of sacred and profane, right? And if you look at, again, shamanic cultures that
Mm-hmm.
predated organized religion, there was very often in many different cultures this notion of the sacred clown, right? And the sacred clown would do all kinds of crazy shit, like show his ass and balls and make fart noises and be just really gross, you know. And there's value there on multiple levels. For one, first and foremost, is it's very easy when we start to take ourselves too seriously that we end up with the Pope, and the Catholic Church, or all of this kind of hierarchical, gold, gilding, everything, thrones and worshiping, just all the shit that goes along with that. There's also, as we've talked about, in cultivating cubensis, I grew on horse manure for a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
And there is something profoundly sacred in grinding up horse turds by hand and using that to grow this medicine, this sacrament. Sex is something that is obviously can and I think it should most often be considered sacred, but it's also fucking dirty. Like it's now, like when you really get down to it, like like there's some funky stuff there. So I think there is a ton of value in really like having a distinguishment between the sacred and the profane, but not such a distinguishment that it completely separates. I mean, I've taken some shits after mushrooms. I'm gonna be real fucking raw with y'all here. I have had some bowel movements after a mushroom trip that felt like the holiest thing that ever happened to me. Like it was cleansing me. I used to say that I'm shitting for my ancestors. That's what it felt like. And so I don't know. We take this stuff way too seriously.
We're also placing like what we consider to our constructs onto that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. All of it is just projection. Whatever it is, like every single bit of it, we are projecting onto it a meaning. We're making it something other than the baseness of what it is. I love this image and this metaphor I've heard recently that somehow got stuck in my head. I think it was somebody that was on a retreat. We were talking about kind of everything being grist for the meal. Do you know what that metaphor means? That term?
No, I've heard it
It's
before, but I
it's
don't know what
just
it means.
grist for the meal. So, like when you used to, or I guess maybe still, but like when there's like those old stone mills for milling grain, right, and grinding up grain, grist was, as I understand it, was kind of like waste powdered, real kind of fine stuff that's used to kind of get things going, right? It's like the stuff that you're never going to use that functions as a sort of a lubricant, not really a lubricant, but I don't know. We could look it up and get a better definition of it, but I see the visual of it, I understand it, and we're talking about how like the kind of phrase that came up is that everything is just grist for the meal. And when what that means is that the same way that I've understood that it's all dirt. We're dirt. Everything. This computer, this wall, my body, all the shit that we put so much importance on, right? It's going to be dirt one day. It might be 10,000 years before this computer is completely back into, dirt. But that's what it's going to be. And that's what we're going to be. And that's what it's all going to be. So, while we can really appreciate and value things and hold things as sacred while they exist, at the same time, like it's all just going to be a dinosaur turd for the next go round. You know, so it's one of the most powerful lessons that I had from the mushroom was back years ago, probably around 2007 or 8 or 9 or so, where I would get myself all decked up for my mushroom experiences, and I'd fast for a day or two, and I'd get my incense ready, and I'd get my special robe, and I'd have all my stuff, and I'd go out there and I'd make sure I had everything ready, and I'd say my prayers, and I'd eat my mushrooms, and I'd have my trip, and I did that for several years. And there was this one time that I remember it was 8 gram trip, and I it just laid me out. It just laid me the fuck down and was like, "You silly, silly little boy. Don't you know all you've got to do is show up and be sincere? That's all you got to do. All this stuff, all these labels that you're putting on things and all this hoopla that you're making out of it, it's just for your ego. This is just you trying to prove to yourself that you're doing something important. Of course, it's important. You're here. It's no more important than every other moment, you know. And that's where even myself, I think about this quite a bit now. Um, that I don't take nearly as much psilocybin as I used to. I used to take a lot of mushrooms. And it's not because I don't want to. It's more because I don't really necessarily have the time and space for it in my life. But at the same time, I don't I don't feel like I have the. It's not even the need. It's that every moment is so sacred, and that can be harder to see at times than others. But if we can get all of our bullshit out of the way, all of the ceremonialism out of the way, all of the projection out of the way, and be in the pure moment, it's all very, very sacred. And it's all kind of nasty. I'm like covered in sweat and lawnmower stuff and talking about something that is perhaps one of the most profound experiences that a human can have. So
Yeah.
I find it very easy to hold both at the same time.
Well, going back to what we were saying earlier, and Kevin was mentioning in our in the rat race that we never give ourselves time. It's the next day of work. I got to start planning for that, or
Mm-hmm.
um, we're thinking our way through everything, but we're not thinking of us. We're thinking of how we can stay on the wheel and just profit in the machine.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, I find that there is time. Like we'll be like, well, I don't have time to go outside. I don't have time to sit down for a second.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just one of those things where if you allow that time to happen, everything else ends up getting a boost from that.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I mean, we do what we want to do. We make a hell of a lot of excuses, but the truth is, we do what we want to do.
yeah,
You know, and so that's just it.
I want to throw this in here too. There's some researchers. I can link the article into the chat. First time I've seen this before. So like autism spectrum disorder, we have no clue what the hell's going on. All
Mm.
right, we can say things, but the truth is we really don't.
Mm-hmm.
There's finally been a speculation of an endogenous DMT pathway uh, becoming hyperactive, and that's
Really?
how that could be a dysfunction at which they are tuned in maybe a little bit differently.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean it's a great theory along with all the other theories, and
Hmm.
I it's just kind of profound that someone in academia had the audacity to bring that up, if you will.
Yeah, we're finally getting there. I mean, I've got a book. You would love to read this book. It's called Acid Dreams that documents LSD being used to treat autism in the 50s, I think, and it was extremely effective at helping self-mutilating autistic, nonverbal autistic children get back on track. And they were giving super high doses of LSD to autistic children. And I've talked with a few autistic spectrumers who feel like psilocybin has been beneficial to them. So, what's going on there? Who knows? But it's sure interesting. That's a really uh, cool thing to just think of as a possibility that there is this DMT pathway lighting up, causing some kind of a hyper focus or a.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think going back to Kevin's comment? Do you think that the burning bush uh, is a sacred bush?
Yeah, I do. I think that is what makes the most sense. I think pretty much the majority, if not all, of the kind of visionary experiences referred to in biblical and many other sacred texts were referring to some type of psychoactive experience. Um, and we know that acacia is all over now over there, and then DMT is all up in the acacia, and so makes makes full sense to me that that would be the case. I really truly think that mushrooms were the original spiritual experience. And that's why it is in us to revere them. It's in us to be afraid of them. It's in us to be in awe of them, because this is what helped to make us who we are. Whether or not the stone ape theory has any credence to it, I don't know. I saw Paul Stamets has given a talk on the apparent reviving of that theory and the potential um, some evidence that may be pointing to it as being true. I don't know how they're going to be able to prove that. Um, Paul Stamets. Oh, Paul, there were so many years that I idolized you, and uh, that's one of the reasons I want to put myself out here in this very raw sense. Is because I know that, like, first of all, I know that I ain't nowhere near like Paul Stamets or any kind of credibility like that, but I prefer to knock myself off the pedestal before other people have the chance to.
Mm-hmm.
Paul, I feel like Paul put himself on a pedestal. He allowed himself to be put on a pedestal for a long time. And, he didn't hardly ever talk about psilocybin. He wrote, the psilocybin, uh, was it Mushrooms of the World, and he includes some psilocybin cultivation stuff in some of his manuals. But he was for years, he was just like, I'm not fucking talking about it. There's books, go read these books. He said something about freedom of speech. I heard him once in an interview talking about um, some kind of law that allowed him to talk about psilocybin uh, in a textbook sense. But he never, aside from one interview that I saw him, or a talk that he gave in Amsterdam or somewhere years ago, he gave a kind of a species identification talk about
Mm-hmm.
psilocybin. He said for the longest time, he said that he ate psilocybin mushrooms very seldomly, like at most once or twice a year. Um, and then I've also talked to people who worked with him and who knew that I've heard him stand up and say, I have never sold psilocybin mushrooms. And I know people that have worked with him and said that is so far from the truth. And it's just now like he's a little bit involved in the Oregon psilocybin scene, but not as a strong advocate. Like he showed up to the last Oregon Health Authority meeting about religious use of psilocybin and didn't say a fucking word. Meanwhile, he's working on a variety of patents for psilocybin supplements and admixtures for psilocybin. So, I am very grateful for all that Paul Stamets has done for mycology, and he certainly taught me a ton through his books. But man, he's for me, he's not the hero that he once was, and I think,
Yeah.
which
Well, he
again,
writes a mean book. Like that is something I will give him credit for.
oh yeah,
Shilton has equally impressive, like especially in the mushroom cultivator.
mm-hmm.
Um, I like the way that from the interviews that I've watched, I definitely appreciate Shilton's take on it. He's a little bit more transparent, a little bit more honest, and kind of acknowledges kind of the atrocities that we've caused against the mycophobia in all of this. Um,
Did you know? And I've read this before, but was reminded of it today when I was working on the cleric training program. Um, did you know that Gordon Wasson lied to Maria Sabina about why he wanted to take mushrooms?
No.
This is the foundation of the psychedelic movement, right? I mean, I think it's really important that we talk about this. It's more kind of shoving under the rug the colonial legacy that is still a part of the modern psychedelic movement. We still revere Wasson and Hoffman as these psychedelic grandfathers, and they allowed Maria Sabina to die of malnutrition. Her house was burned to the ground because she allowed the Westerners in to take mushrooms. And Gordon Wasson got paid $60,000 in 1955 for that article in Life magazine. Maria Sabina didn't get a dime out of that. She didn't get a fucking dime. So anyway, Gordon Wasson, when he went to Maria Sabina, he for years sought out, um, you know, where to gain access to these mushrooms. He had read in some letters from Richard Evans Schultes, and one of his friends, who Schultes is a infamous ethnobotanist. Yeah, you know Schultes, right? He did some fucking amazing cataloging of psychedelic plants and plants in general in the Amazon. He's an amazing historical figure. Um, that really does seem to be genuinely, as far as I can tell, a good human being. But Wasson heard about these mushrooms, sought them out, eventually was led to Maria Sabina, told her he knew that the mushrooms were only consumed for healing or divination, right? To find lost people or items, whatnot. And he told Maria Sabina that he wanted to eat the mushrooms because he was concerned about the whereabouts of his son, when that was completely untrue. He just wanted to experience the mushrooms. Um, and I don't know, man. I do think that's really, really relevant. And then they brought the mushrooms up to Hoffman, who isolated and synthesized and did all that. Uh, but anyway, it's just like it goes back again to the energy of this whole thing. And this is as much as we want it to be a medicine like any other that we take that fixes our problem, that is pure and simple not what this is. And when you see the tail, that's how I describe it, but that's really not the best way. When you see the arc of a mushroom experience, there have been so many times that I've worked with people or had my own experiences where I'll have a mushroom experience, but at some point I'll realize that the mushroom experience did not start when I took the mushrooms. The mushroom experience started maybe weeks or months before that. And the end of the mushroom experience, well, by far isn't, in 8 hours after taking the mushrooms. It can be weeks and months. I think it was the last call we had here that we ended up talking about that, my very first mushroom trip, and like it brought back some really powerful um, lessons there. And so that we, are introducing this experience into our modern wellness culture with the unspoken backdrop of, theft and deception, um, is relevant. And that we are bringing this experience into our modern wellness culture and treating it like any other experience, there will be consequences to that. There will be, and I have had my own consequences, and like I'm not saying this because I feel like I'm any better or I necessarily know anymore. I mean, I probably do know more than a lot of people, just because I've had a lot of experience and I've made a lot of mistakes, and that's what I would like to be able to bring to the table. Is from the mistakes that I've made, a better way to practice and a better way to engage and understand this experience before there are more mistakes made. Learn from my mistakes, please. So, what might those mistakes be? Ooh, boy. What are the big mistakes that I have made with the mushroom? First and foremost is not listening to the mushroom. And I'll be straight up. There are a number of places in my life that I can look back where a mushroom experience told me something very plainly about a person or about an activity or behavior or whatever, and I did not listen, and it led to some serious consequences. Probably the biggest one was cannabis. There was a long time where mushrooms were like, dude, you gotta chill on the fucking weed, bro. It's like, well, I smoke chronic till I die, baby. I'm Snoop Dogg's grandson. Um, and I still think, honestly, I may have said this to you or not, Tristan. I don't know, but I truly feel that my arrest was not as much a consequence of illegally cultivating and distributing psilocybin as it was this very negative relationship that I had with cannabis. And it was, after the arrest, and I was, subject to random drug testing for the first time in my life, that it really occurred to me, you know, it's not actually. I mean, it occurred to me pretty quickly. Like when the shit was hitting the fan, I was like, it was like there was this voice kind of in the back of my head that's knowing, like, you didn't fucking listen, did you? You
Save the
didn't.
bong.
Yeah, exactly. Fucking A, exactly. It's so fucking on point. Thank you, Tristan. So on point. Go hide the fucking bong in the log, and they'll find the mushrooms. Like, I mean, that's some real shit. That's
No,
some.
it makes me think like because you had Mr. E, and and I feel like if you would have hidden anything in that, if you would have wanted to have tried to get like Mr. E hidden in the log, not the bong in the log in hindsight, like
Mhm.
um, and that's just I definitely believe that like so I've been like using a Joel for off and on probably for like a year. Like I've used it for a couple of months and then I stopped and I recently had picked it back up. And like even in my last experience, sacrament experience with mushroom, like it's part of my subconscious thought loops. Like, why am I using this? What am I doing? You know that you can stop this.
Mhm.
And I knew coming out of that was something that I needed to do, but I knew I wasn't like ready. And so like about almost a week now away from it, but I think there's also like a part of when you are ready, those obstacles appear, and that there's a timeline for that. Although I know I get what you're saying that with cannabis that you had the mushrooms have warned you, like you had been aware of, like you have an unhealthy relationship, who's using who here,
Mhm.
and I know
Mhm.
what that's like, but yeah, there's also the part of whenever you're ready to walk said path,
Yeah, I
to
mean,
put that down.
things are always working out for me. Things are
Yeah.
always working out for you, right? This universe is on our side, 100%. Like, that's beyond the shadow of a doubt. Is that this thing is here to help us grow and make progress. So no matter what path I choose, I'm going in the right direction. But it's like, you ever play Candyland? Remember that game? Do you want to like slip ahead to Gumdrop Mountain, or do you have to go all the way around whatever it
Oh,
is, Greasy Gumbo or some shit? You know, like, so if I would have listened and got a better grip on my relationship with cannabis, I'd probably be where I am a lot faster, you know?
Yeah.
So, it's not that I'm not criticizing myself or anybody else, but, we can take a shorter route to the desk where the next place that we're going. And I think that's what the mushrooms really are trying to do. They're, not maybe not the mushrooms are trying to do, but that's what our higher self, that's what our God self is trying to do when we eat mushrooms. It's trying to be like, hey, I see you. I'm here. You got a chance to hear me better right now. Listen, I want it. We're trying to get like farther. We're trying to get better. And like here, if you want to do it faster, if you want, you don't want to have to go through all that other shit. Like, let's do this instead. You know. And sometimes we listen, sometimes we don't. But we would be better off. We would all be better served to listen to that higher self um, more more readily. I see that we got a comment here from Awake to Now. Oh, where'd it go? What happened? Oh, okay. So what you are saying is that it's important to honor the mushrooms and not come to them with a take attitude. Oh gosh, yeah. I think that is a very important thing to consider in all this. And if you like Awake to Now, you're welcome to join in on the conversation by clicking that link in the stream above you, in the chat above you. Love to have a conversation with you about this. Anybody else, I like to offer opportunities for newcomers to hop in. I know we've got Baba Booey and Midwest Mushroom Hunters and Kevin there, who we've heard from multiple times, and I'm always happy to hear from you guys as well. But love to hear from new voices in terms of a real time conversation. That's really what this is about, y'all. I know Tristan and I get on here and talk a lot, and as time goes on, I feel confident that more people will be more comfortable in participating in the conversation live. But this is really what we're having this opportunity for people to jump in and talk about how they understand their mushroom experiences, questions that they might have, ways that they engage with the mushroom. But this idea
Mhm.
of honoring the mushroom, not just gobbling up the mushrooms. I've definitely talked about this before. The first time I ate mushrooms when I was 19 years old, I ate mushrooms for 3 days straight. And on day 4, I woke up and was like, oh, that's not how you do it. That's no, 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 no. That's not how you do this thing. And so, yes, take mushrooms, process the experience, really give yourself over to the experience and let it unfold as time goes on. I'll even say right here, right now. Okay, this is a pretty big public admission here, and you know, again, knock me off the pedestal really quick because I'm just a dude like y'all. Um, but in Jamaica, I did a lot of well, I did a lot of 4 doses over the course of 10 days with people, and eventually I pulled that back and started doing 3 doses over the course of 7 days, and that's a lot of psilocybin. It's a lot of mushrooms, especially for people who have not ever taken psilocybin. And the vast majority of people that I work with then, and to some extent now, still have never taken psilocybin. Now, I do think that if we are trying to get people, into that kind of mystical experience, that big wow, overwhelming, I'm going to need some time to process this experience, that there is value in kind of tiptoeing into that. So I still very much like to give people, a modest dose, wait a couple of days, and then based on how they responded to that initial dose, really just like give it to them hard. Um, but as I've looked back and reflected on my approach in Jamaica and some of the outcomes that I saw, I feel like it was in some cases, and maybe in a majority of cases, um, overkill, and it may have conveyed the wrong message, being like just keep going, keep going, keep going. When you can get years of material out of a single experience. The vast majority of people really truly do great with like one experience a year. You know, it's a big deal. I think it's interesting to point out at the same time that in traditional societies that you always had these kind of shamanic personalities who do dive deeper more regularly. And I don't necessarily agree with that, Midwest. The more you take, the less you want. I mean, to a certain extent, yeah. Um, but if I had all the free time in the world, I would definitely take a big dose once a month for sure. That's
Wait, what
just
does
like,
a big dose even mean to you, though?
oh, like, you know, minimum 7 grams, but more like, 10 to 15. Um, you know, there's multiple kind of reasons behind that. Um, like I was saying, I think I would classify myself in this kind of explorer group. I don't like the term shaman. I don't ever call myself a shaman. Um, I have definitely been able to, use techniques that the mushrooms have taught me to help bring healing to other people. And I'm only just now really able to start acknowledging that publicly. But, I've had enough people tell me, like, you were doing something, weren't you? And I'm like, kind of. And I know that it's having an impact. Um, but, I am, after 23, 4 years now of slowly, like it took me, the first 10 years that I took psilocybin, I took it at most every 3 months, more like every 6 months. And I would take it and be like, whoa,
At
okay,
what max dosage?
like 5 grams, And I was like, what the fuck was that? And I would need to process and go through it. And then, like, think about it like bungee jumping. You know what I mean? I've
Mm-hmm.
never bungee jumped and I don't plan to, or skydiving. But, people that are starting out skydiving don't usually go skydiving every weekend. Or people that go rock climbing don't usually go rock climbing every weekend. You build up an endurance, you build up a familiarity, you buy tools and you get all the stuff and you get training and you get, and then you're like, all right, not only am I going skydiving once a month, I'm gonna start teaching other motherfuckers how to do it too. Yeah, and kind of that's where I feel like I'm at now. And I would love. I'm praying for the day where I was thinking about this today too when I was working on that cleric training program. And if anybody's interested, just so you know that we are doing a cleric and minister training program through Sanctuary, teaching people how to hold space, be a support, and become an ordained minister for Sanctuary so that you can be working with people directly. But I was thinking about this today, how I so look forward to the day when we have a church property where the biggest part of my job is to train people and to like say, all right, let's go. We're gonna go all take a bunch of mushrooms and I'm gonna kind of like, walk through this with you. And I love it. 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 It is, it's the, it's thrilling. It's an honor. It is sacred. It's profane. It's all of it. Thank you, Ron. Love you too. Um, and even still, like it's not something that I'm going to do every week. There have been times in my life when I was on a training with psilocybin where like every single week, every Saturday, I took 5 grams. that was about a 3 month period that I did it every week. I took 5 to 10 grams. As I've mentioned before, there were, a 2 year period. That 3 month window sat within that 2 year window where I was taking mushrooms at minimum twice a month, but then there would be segments in there where I would take more, and it took a lot of building up to that. It's a lot on your energetic body, your physical body, your mental processing. There's a lot there, and there's a lot that I am still unpacking from experiences years ago. If my job was working as a teller in a bank, or if I was an insurance agent or a pilot or something other than a psychedelic minister, then it'd be a very different story. But this is my life. This is the field that I am constantly involved in. So, I don't think that my experience is anywhere near relatable to most people in how they're going to work with psilocybin over the course of their life. But one thing that I will agree with you, Midwest psilocybin hunter, I will, agree that a little bit goes a long way. And I think that for most people, the more they take, the less that they really want to. But yeah, there's definitely a segment of our population. And if you haven't seen the YouTube video that I put out for Sanctuary, is it a mental illness or a psychedelic superpower? Go check that out. I do think that many of those in our society who are labeled as mentally ill, like myself, are actually people who would have been healers in a more traditional culture uh, if they had the container and the support. So I don't know if any of that made any sense. It was a bit of a rant.
No, I mean, it definitely did to me. I swear, every single time that you share the the 2 years leading up to Jamaica, and even the those several months where you were, you know, coming of it even more frequently. It's such a I don't want to use the word like it's crazy to think about. I think coming to these from a different viewpoint as the monthly use of these and the other. It's that's hard, and I guess it kind of makes me want to ask you. When you were in Jamaica and you were facilitator dosing and you had these other people with you that were facilitator dosing, um, the energetic body that you're referring to that it takes a toll on. I mean, you know, even Athena had talked about like people almost like burning out because it was just such a hard thing, a grueling existence in a way, because it was just so hard because
Mm-hmm.
you're in that space, but you're holding space for someone else in a very vulnerable space for yourself, and that was
Yeah, and I mean,
taxing.
if you get into it, the deeper you get into that, then like we holding space is such a kind of a, forgive me if this sounds arrogant, but it's kind of a kindergarten level.
Hmm.
You know, it's like holding space is kind of the most basic. When you are actively processing material alongside of people, um, when you are communicating with, you know, ancestors or disembodied entities and that kind of stuff, I think that becomes a significant level up and has even more requirements. But when you're saying that, I remember there was uh, this young facilitator that I worked with down there who was probably one of the most um, kind of innately talented people that I've worked with in the space. At least he got it. He understood a lot real quick. He was like, "Oh fuck, this is what's going on here." And I remember after the first retreat that he worked with me, and um, after a big night of a lot of processing, and he spent the majority of the time kind of observing me, and he came up to me and he's like, "Dude, you're a fucking workhorse, dude. How the fuck do you maintain this?" And I don't have an answer, and I don't think that I'm necessarily anything special. I think we all have different skills and talents. This is just a skill and a talent that has not been part of our cultural experience for a very long time, you know. Um, and again, I think that's where it comes to this, like the notions of mental illness. Like it would be really difficult for me to try to convey the levels of suffering that I can endure. Um, you know, and
Yeah.
it's not fun. I mean, it can be like it's not fun, but I understand the value and I understand why it's important. And I would rather do that in mushroom space than in regular life. And before experiencing that in the mushroom world, it was much more part of my kind of daily life. And I didn't realize. I thought I was just kind of experiencing my own kind of misery at being alive. I didn't understand that I was processing for a lot of people other than myself, you know. And then when I got into the mushrooms and I started seeing what was going on, then that gave me a window where I could focus in and say, all right, this is what I'm good at, and this is the time to do it. And just I mean, there have been so many times that I have just been a burning ball of fire curled up on the ground, just screaming and moaning and wailing, and able to understand it as a beautiful gift that I was given and that I'm able to give back.
Yeah. No,
So,
it's definitely it just makes me think like in some alternate universe is do you think you're just an amazing secretary or something like,
yeah, just filing shit.
yeah.
Hey, that's a neat idea. That's a neat idea. I mean, okay, seriously, like if I could have anything, if I could do like any job, I would like do that twice a month and then do this kind of stuff. Like talk about this kind
Yeah.
of stuff and share this with people to help bring an understanding into our society, to take it out of this like, oh, you're gonna have the cognitive insights and mystical experience, and you're gonna, all that fucking textbook shit, and talk about it in real experiential terms so that people can get more comfortable with it. But I love it. I love getting in there
Well,
and shoveling coal.
oh yeah,
I love it.
definitely. Whenever you said that there's a difference between like holding space for someone or like not really entering into the space with them, but kind of like helping shoveling the coal. And I think that once once you the place that you're at, it's like where's the line divided? Because you're not going into the space, you're not holding space without shoveling coal at this point.
Mhm.
Um, and
I think about like, will I ever be able to have a trip where I don't feel like the caretaker. You know, like, will I ever be able to eat mushrooms with people and not feel like I'm responsible? You know, and I don't know that I ever want to. And it may be the only time that I do is when I take mushrooms by myself.
Or whenever the final, the capstone for the cleric training.
Yeah, maybe. Or the minister
Or the
ordination.
minister training.
Um,
Yeah. Have
yeah,
them.
it'll be interesting. It's just like, like when I take mushrooms with other people, I don't even like I'm just watching out for other people, you know? Like it's almost impossible for me at this point to take mushrooms with other people and focus on myself. And I think that that's okay, you know, but it's like, you know,
Do you think that those entities are already taking care of you? So you feel,
maybe I'm just thinking like, does when the guy that drives the Tark, or when the pilot rides in a plane with somebody else, is he ever able to fully let go, or is he somehow thinking about what's going on in the cockpit? I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
that might not be the best analogy, um, but it yeah, it's something that I think about. Um, but anyway, it doesn't matter. I love it. I love it so much. I love being able to be of service in this capacity, and I look forward to being able to do it more. Most people do not understand what the fuck we're talking about. Like the vast majority of people, that if everybody in the country was to listen to this, I'd be surprised if 1,000 people were like, "Yep, I get it." You know,
I think you'd be surprised.
okay, good. I mean, I hope so. I hope so. Or at least it's being discussed in a way that is um, relatable to some extent. Uh, but yeah, when I dose with people, like there's very few people that like can understand, like they don't fucking get it until we do like 3 or 4 doses, and then they're like, and then I dose with them, and they're like, oh, okay, now I see why I want you. Come, please, come eat mushrooms with us, please. You know. So anyway, everything in its time. I'm such a fortunate person, and I'm really grateful to be here and spend this time with you all. Thank you, Eric. Not for saying I'm right, but thank you for being a ongoing part of this. Thank you, Kevin, for continuing to show up, and all the others that are out there. Share this with your friends, people. We're going to start getting a little more
Hmm.
proactive with these, trying to get some questions submitted beforehand. Really, really, really would love to get more people here talking in real time with us live. That's what Restream is a great, great tool for that. We're probably going to be doing some trivia and doing some more fun stuff with this, but just really grateful to have this platform to be able to just talk about psilocybin, to be on psilocybin in the way that I know how. So thank you, Tristan. As always, you're a wonderful friend and colleague, and I'm looking forward to many, many years with you and seeing you grow and develop these skills. I am very confident that this is a part of who you are as well, and I'm grateful to be uh, able to just share any information that I can with you in particular. So until next time, everybody, got anything you want to say? Thing you want to say to sign off with, Tristan?
Uh, yeah. Check out the Psilocybin Says episode. This one was really good.
Oh, did you give it a listen?
Yeah. Very powerful one. Very unique with it 4 weeks after. Um, and other than that, like get ready for on psilocybin to kind of take some, I don't know, some different turns as we like create what this is going to be, having more familiar guests and different guests, and kind of figuring it out as we go in this beautiful informal setting. Also, Psilocybin Says underwear dropped, and yeah, go get you some undies.
Get you some draws. Sport the Psilocybin Says logo on your derriere.
Spore spreaders.
That's right. Spread those spores. All right. Appreciate you, Tristan. Appreciate you, everybody. Share it with your friends. Much love. Much love.